In the New Testament, Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 13, "For now we see in a glass darkly, but then we will see face to face." This glass in ancient Greek times was in fact a bronze mirror relating to Persephone, Eve, and Demeter, her mother, Zeus, her father, Satan, and Pan, Adam. Now, Corinth was a major center in Greek religion, including the Eleusinian mysteries, which were all dedicated to these queens, Demeter and Persephone. These mysteries were secret initiation rites that promised a better afterlife. In some ancient rituals, mirrors were used for divination, which was how people communicated with gods, and they would see the god's face in a mirror. Now, ancient mirrors were not glass, as said, they were polished bronze or silver, and they produced a dark, distorted, and dim image. In some traditions, like I've said, the mirror represented the fragmented self or the soul trapped in the material world. To see face to face was the ultimate goal of an initiate, moving from a blurry, indirect reflection of the divine to a direct, mediated encounter. And this was prevalent in Corinth. The mirror verse in the climax of Paul's hymn to love in the mystery religions can be described as secret knowledge. Now, the Bible is clear, as I will say later on, that Christ and God, love, is what the Greeks would call agape, or agape, right? And eros is what proliferated Corinth at the time, mainly based upon sex and a pagan way of seeing love. So, now in 1 Corinthians 13:7, Paul uses a repetitive structure, a polysyndeton, which sounds like this: panta, stegai, pantai, panta, pistoi, panta, opise, panta, upomene. All things it bears, or things it believes, or things it hopes, or things it endures. The word for all things is panta, plural of pas, which is the exact root for the god Pan. And in the Greek world, the universe was akin to all, because of course they knew about the Hindu gods, and they knew that Pan was an avatar of Vishnu. This is later on described in all the things that I've talked about, but I will get to that in another video. But I want to concentrate on Pan and Persephone and how this 100% relates to the Garden of Eden, and I'll do that within this video. Now, by saying agape, love covers, bears all things, Paul is effectively saying that love is greater than the all, Pan. He is taking a word associated with the chaotic, wild god of nature, Pan, Lucifer, morning star, Hermes, placing it under the authority of a higher spiritual principle. Also, in Greek mythology, Hermes, Pan, was associated with cleverness, speech, and a trick of reflection. Some ancient traditions even linked the mirror to his way. Now, to a Corinthian, this might evoke the limits of Hermetic knowledge. Paul argues that while tongues and prophecy, the realm of messengers, Hermes, because Hermes was a psychopomp, he would escort people into the underworld, and Persephone, as many people will know, was cast into the underworld through a gift of knowledge relating to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, What God is saying in the Bible and here in Paul is that shadows are not the same as in God, not the same as a face-to-face encounter with God, just like in the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve, Persephone and Pan hid their faces after eating of the fig tree. Now, there was more to it than just literal eating, as everybody really knows. It was about sex, and it was about rape of Eve when Hades raped her. This is explained in all the Greek and Hindu and other myths around the world. And obviously, that fruit there that was about sex, and it's symbolized as the fig tree, which is, so I'll go into that. And then the pomegranate has always been related to Persephone, pomegranate. And the fig tree has always been related to paganism, and specifically female vulva and vagina. Now, in these myths, in these Eleusinian myths and rites, say within the actual phrase that Paul uses, glass darkly and dimly, it is actually in the Greek an enigmate, which is where we get the word enigma or riddle. So he's very likely referencing these Eleusinian mysteries. Now, he doesn't want people to chase secret riddles and all-encompassing knowledge, Pan. But without love, you are just a clanging gong or a tinkling cymbal, it will be in some translations. And that was like a tambourine type thing, a gong, which you would rattle and tinkle until there was a frenzy of sexual frenzy or of meeting this god, whoever you were trying to contact. Now, yes, because Persephone's love was not a romance of choice, but a story of descent, loss, and mediation. Persephone was lured away whilst looking at her reflection, or a flower symbolizing the soul, because becoming captivated by the material world, you will descend into the underworld, Hades. In the cult of Demeter and Persephone, the highest level of initiation was apotia, the beholding. Initiates were promised that they would eventually see the sacred things face to face to gain eternal life. And Paul used the exact same logic. He tells the Corinthians that their current knowledge is like the lower levels of a mystery cult. It's partial. It's partial. You're only seeing things darkly. Now, the whole point to the whole of the Garden of Eden is to find true love. We all know that. But these ancient documents and myths all relate in the New Testament as well. And even in Isaiah, it speaks about how daughters of Zion will not use mirrors anymore. Now, in the myth, Persephone is offered food in the underworld. By eating 6 seeds of a pomegranate, she is bound to Hades. The pomegranate was a gift from Hades, but it was a trap of partiality. It's a partial gift. It wasn't enough to keep her in the underworld forever, but it was enough to ensure she could never be fully face to face with her mother, Demeter, or the sun all year round. Paul describes spiritual gifts, tongues, prophecy, knowledge, as things that are partial. Just as the pomegranate seeds divided Persephone's life between 2 worlds, these gifts are only meant for the in-between time. Paul argues that these gifts, the things the Corinthians are obsessed with, will pass away. In the Eleusinian mysteries, the gift shown to initiates was often a simple ear of grain or a pomegranate revealed in a flash of light. This was apoptia. Now, Paul uses this concept of a sudden revealing, but changes the object. He says a mystery isn't a secret object or a ritual seed. The mystery is that love is the only thing that survives the transition from this world to the next. Now, the clanging cymbal was the signature instrument of the court of Seville and was also used in the Dionysian processions. Like I say, that's within the 1 Corinthians 13 as well. Talks about this tinkling, hollow cymbal. Cymbal. Now, when one puts this together with the fall of man and with Adam and Eve, one can find within that text that Paul says the thing, love never fails. But the word fails is piptai, literally means to fall or to drop. So God is talking about, through Paul, about the fall of Adam and Eve. The entire myth of Persephone is defined by a fall. She falls into the underworld. She falls for the trick of Zeus's snake, Satan's snake, and she doesn't have true love in her heart for Adam, and Adam doesn't have true love in his heart for Eve. Now, it also talks about how when I was a child, I talked like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. And this is very telling because in the mystery religions, children were the initiated and were told stories of Persephone and the pomegranate as a literal truth. And Paul is arguing that God's love, the tree of life, and Jesus will be the end of these riddles and the end of falling into darkness. And one day you will see God face to face, i.e. Jesus Christ. And God himself, obviously, but it's referencing Jesus Christ within the fact that we humans will rise and meet him first. So the face-to-face language is very much about this mirror, and it's very much about that seeing through a glass darkly. Now, one can go on from that and discover that there's more to it than that. So the visual image of Cronus holding a scythe is what we all can see within imagery. And that scythe was in fact about cutting down Adam and Eve and bringing in death. He was never an evil God, it was all metaphor, and like I say, he never ate his children and never actually hung on a tree. He is just God, the Father, hell. Now, in the presence of all of this, one can relate this all to pomegranates, and even the blood of a pomegranate symbolic of Jesus and the fall of these partial gifts, because when you were trying to find these gods within the mirrors, you would have a offering, like a pomegranate, I could say, and this 100% links back to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, good and bad. Now, I could go on a bit more, but obviously I just made this video to be quite brief, and I'm going to make a lot more on these and just explain a bit more, because you know, in the presence of all these foreshadows, one must understand that God is always just realigning and rectifying them all. And in the garden, we all know that Pan, or Mercury, had a shadow, and his shadow was the fact that he was always trying to control his life, and he felt fear and shame about his naked body, about his mortality. And within other myths, like Chinese myths, you have the Monkey King, and it's the same person, same god. And he even stole, in another part of the story, he stole a pomegranate and the pomegranates were immortality granting, so he stole one, but he could only become a god partially. It didn't make you immortal forever. None of those ancient gods are immortal forever. So even the most powerful gods will die eventually. And so one can say that when even if you steal that, they say in China, they say peaches, but it is in fact the golden peaches, but they are in fact pomegranates. Even with that, if you just have eros and no agape, love, you're only seeing through a glass darkly, and you'll never understand what life's all about. You must have love, sex, harmony, children, and it really does relate to children in the end. How a good, prosperous relationship should have one. Obviously, if you can't, then that's not your fault. So, in the context of this fall, one can see that the nakedness of the fall is a result of this dim mirror. The face-to-face vision is the result of full knowledge, divine consciousness. Now, as a closing point, Krishna and Pan, they were all killed with an arrow. Most people will understand that it was an arrow in the head. Now, Jesus has a crown of thorns. Now, that crown of thorns 100% relates to Mercury, Lucifer, Morningstar, because after the curse of Garden Eden and fall, God brought brambles and all sorts of thorns upon that garden, and that's why he wore the crown of thorns. And it's also a bit like an arrow on the head. And Jesus was there naked, fully on the cross, because when they were crucified, they were in fact naked, embarrassed and shamed. But he was fully known to the world in a most excellent way. He didn't try and cover himself. He was complete, and he sacrificed himself for us all, and to 100% bring back Adam and Eve.